Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Welcome back to another episode of Keiser Voices. We're continuing our journey this month, taking a look behind the scenes at the graduate school. And joining us today is Dr. Stephanie Franks, the Director of Admissions for Graduate School, and Mr. Ajeet Saisbhan from Financial Aid Department. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Heather.
So we thought it'd be appropriate to have you both join us on this behind the scenes episode, just because of the handoff that we see with admissions and financial aid and getting that student going and then continuing on in their program. So why not have the dream team for us be together on this podcast as we take a look at how to open the doors and how financial aid helps make graduate school possible. So my first question, I think, makes a lot of sense to start with Dr. Franks, and that is, what does the admission process look like for a prospective student?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, most individuals are looking for information. They want to understand what programs are available, what the institution has to offer. And I oftentimes that the top three questions that are asked by most prospective students that we need to address are, can I afford my education? How long is it going to take me? And what is my potential return on investment? The outcomes component. So the process for us is really understanding what that student's particular needs are. And that's by going through a conversation, understanding their needs, understanding what they're hoping to accomplish, determining what might be the best program fit for that particular individual, and establishing whether or not we have the best program that meets their particular needs. Once we've established that, then we do everything in our power to assist that student through the application process. We have a dedicated admissions counselor that works directly with each student, and that dedicated counselor goes through that initial conversation. Once they've completed the application for admission, we work with them hand in hand to determine what documents are necessary for us to render an admissions decision. Once a decision is rendered, we are doing a warm handoff to our financial aid team, and we have them meet with a dedicated financial aid officer as well, who is on Mr. Ajeet Saisbhan's team, and those individuals walk them through the financial aid component. So we are with them from inquiry to the start of classes. We're walking them through their first semester, making sure that they are doing well in their courses, answering and addressing any questions that they have. And then we want to see them there on the stage at graduation. So it's not just the beginning of the process, but we're there from start to finish.
Dr. Franks, when your team is supporting these applicants, are there any qualities that stand out that really show that they're going to be a strong potential student here at the graduate school?
Absolutely. One of those qualities is, are they a self-starter? Are they an individual that takes initiative and gets the information that they need to make a viable decision, first and foremost, about what the best fit program and best fit institution is for them? Second, are they an independent learner? Are they someone that can be given a syllabus and work in an asynchronous environment, which, for those who don't know what asynchronous refers to, can they work in an environment where they're held to a certain set of standards and expectations in meeting certain deadlines with regards to projects, assignments, and research? And can they be independent in making sure that they accomplish those things on a week-to-week basis under an 8-week term structure? Independence is critical in a good graduate student because, again, being a self-starter, being independent, in addition to that, are they willing to ask questions? Are they someone who is looking to learn and gain knowledge, and they're not afraid to search out for those resources and tools on their own? Meanwhile, having the support, tools, and resources provided to them from their faculty and academic team as well. So can they be a self-starter? Are they independent? And Are they willing to put the time, effort, and resources in to be successful in this program? And you can tell that from the very beginning, from point of inquiry, when you start having those initial conversations. Are they determined to make this happen? What is their why? What are they hoping to accomplish? Those are all the things that we look for in someone who has the highest propensity to be successful in our programs.
So then, Mr. G, this is where your team sort of comes into the equation. You know, they've gone from inquiry, they've completed the application, they've had those very insightful conversations with the admissions team. And then this is the point that your team kind of takes over or joins the conversation. How does the financial aid team support students in understanding their options?
That's a great question, Heather. So as Stephanie said, those new students are assigned a dedicated financial aid officer. During that student's initial financial aid appointment, all of the available funding options will be presented to that student. Each one of these options are explained in detail so the students can really make an informed decision on what the best funding package is for their needs. Each funding package is therefore customized for each student, right? And then something that I really like as well for students, these programs are going to be multiple years, and we package each student one academic year at a time. Why that's important is what may be a good funding package for a student this year may change come next year. And that way, next year, we can customize that funding package again, check eligibility for different funding options, and then we move on and get that student package in the right way. Students are much better equipped at that point to make the decision to choose the funding package that suits their needs at that given time.
How can students make the most out of their funding plans when we take a look at scholarships or grants when eligible, Department of Education funding? I mean, how can they truly make the most of it?
That's a great question. So financial aid at the graduate level, though it is the same category that they use the funding for their undergraduate degree, there are different sources of funding available at the grad level. It's important that when they have that interview, that conversation with their dedicated financial aid officer, that they get a good understanding on the features, the benefits of all the different funding options available. Okay, so if it may be loans, scholarships, we do not have Pell Grants at the grad school level. That's very important. Some students are expecting that, but grad school students cannot use Pell Grants. So it's very much a combination of loans, maybe an out-of-pocket that some students may have saved, preparing for grad school study, and scholarships to help cover the cost of that program.
So I actually have a question for both of you, and I think it's very appropriate to ask you both about the misconceptions about graduate school, whether we're talking about applying or even the financial aid. Dr. Franks, I don't know if you would like to go first, but what are some of the common misconceptions that come up in this process?
One of the biggest misconceptions is I can't afford my education. And the reason that's a misconception is based on what you've just heard from Ajeet. There are a number of funding resources that are available to each student, but each financial aid funding plan is customized. And it's customized based on what school you choose, what program you choose, the time it takes you to complete the program, whether or not you have transfer credits that could reduce the time or reduce the cost, any type of gift aid like scholarships. So there are a number of different options, and typically it takes a combination of many in order to develop a funding plan. So what I like to tell students is that your education is an investment in your future. And if you hope to achieve the outcome that we just discussed in the conversation of what you're looking to accomplish as far as return on investment, it is going to take an investment financially in order to do that, just like purchasing a home or purchasing a car. And it's not a decision that you make lightly. It's a decision that you really think upon, and you have individuals along the way that help guide you to ensure that you're making the right decision. And that's where Ajeet's team and my team come in. We're there from start to finish to help guide you into what path is the best direction for you as a student. So affordability is one of the most common misconceptions throughout higher ed, not just with Keiser University.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I agree. One of the biggest concerns with these students and the grad programs is how can I afford this? Coming from the undergraduate degree, there is a very fixed cap on what they can borrow, some of the funds they can use from the federal government. And students may have been told towards the end of their bachelor's degree, you were approaching your cap, you're approaching your limit. So they come out, they graduate, they think they're very close to that limit. And what grad students need to know is that becoming a graduate student, master's, doctoral level, the federal government actually opens up a whole new amount of funding available to these students, quite a significant amount. So that limit now goes up a lot, giving you a lot of new funding that you can use to cover the cost of your degree. Not only that, but as a grad student, there's a type of loan called Graduate Plus loan. And if you are approved for this, it can help you not only cover the costs of your education, but even allow students to get some money back that can help cover living expenses while in school. Grad programs, we're talking about students who may be working, they have monthly bills, and they think, how can I start school? And then maybe I'm going to have an out of pocket. That's going to be an extra monthly bill for me. How can I afford that extra cost? This is where they need to understand with this increased amount of funding available from, going into the graduate program, you don't really have to have an out of pocket. You can actually get a funding package to cover your costs fully for school so that you are not burdened, by all of these extra monthly fees or monthly costs adding up, so that you could really focus on your education, focus on being successful in school. And then when you graduate, that's when you would have that discussion about getting onto that repayment plan.
And I think it's important to note, in addition to what you guys are both pointing out, is that once you go into graduate school, and Ajeet, correct me if I'm wrong, your undergraduate student loans, your public student loans, if you will, they get deferred while you're pursuing your education.
That is correct. Very true. So once you're considered an active student in school, you will be reported to all of these agencies as an active student. And this allows your previous loans, your previous funding that you took out to go into deferment where you do not have to make payments on them while you're still enrolled. That is correct.
And I think it's also important to point out that both of the admissions and the financial aid team, you guys are available when the students are available, because a lot of this population are working adults. I think the last time I checked, the average age was 40s, mid 40s, and please correct me if I'm wrong. How important is that to meet your students where they're at?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go first here. We have operating hours that are conducive to the needs for adult learners for a reason, because we know that they're balancing many things: school, work, family, other obligations. And in order to meet them where they are, you need to be available when they're available. So we have evening hours and weekend hours, as well as your traditional day hours. And we have a rotating schedule so that they have at any given time someone from an admissions area, as well as someone from financial aid, that can address any question, concern, or support them at any given time throughout the process.
Yep, that's accurate. So a lot of our financial aid officers tend to get a lot of our working students late in the evening, and it's because they finish their work day, they're at home now, they can make and put aside that time to have the discussions necessary to do their financial aid process. And that's why, like Stephanie said, it's very important that we always have coverage, late at night, weekends, whatever the student may need, so that we can really work around their schedule.
And then, Ajeet, one of the things that we talked about with the deans in a previous episode of this podcast, when we got to go behind the scenes with them, are those programs that offer in-person residencies. And I know that can be a point of concern with the travel, and then in regards to financial aid. How does your team explain that to kind of give those students a peace of mind that you can still pursue this journey even with some other requirements of you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that kind of ties back to what I mentioned before, where grad school students are in fact able to borrow a little bit extra to help with those living expenses. So my financial aid officers are trained to look at these student schedules. We know when they're going to be attending these residencies in person. When we're doing that financial aid funding package for that particular academic year, we would we would bring it up. We would say, hey, just letting you know, in July of this year, I see that you will be traveling to attend this residency. We would suggest at that time, to let's see what type of extra funding we can get for you so that your travel expenses are covered. It may not be something that's charged through the school, that is your personal charge, but we will try to get that extra funding out to you to help cover that charge. So we definitely have that conversation with the student. Sometimes they may not know when it is, and we would see it on that schedule before they do, and we would let them know, and so that they can best prepare for it.
And if you don't mind my adding, Heather, I'd be remiss not to talk about our student first philosophy. And that will lead me right back into what Ajeet was saying about residency, but more on an experience perspective. Our student first philosophy is to provide exceptional services from every department across the Keiser system. That has been our culture for many years since inception. And again, with residency, we have the residency experience for a reason. It's not that we're having students come out so that they can spend additional money to travel to come to West Palm Beach in Florida. The goal is that we want them to experience firsthand what it's like to be on campus in a face-to-face environment, to network and collaborate with peer students, their faculty, the administration, the vice chancellor of the graduate school. And having that experience, coming from an individual like myself who did go through residency and recently received my doctorate back in July, that was one of the most exceptional experiences of my time as a doctoral student, because I had an opportunity to engage in a way that I wasn't able to do so from a fully online perspective. And I had an opportunity to actually meet the people in person that were going to be supporting me in my dissertation, my chair, my committee. And you do that twice, depending on which doctoral program you're in. So residency is an invaluable resource and tool that's part of the program, and it's meant to be a support mechanism, not a disadvantage or an impact to an individual. So we highly recommend that you start thinking about that as a part of your process, because it is an experience that you just can't go without.
No, I think that's good to point out. And I really think it goes to show, and like I said, we've already spoken to the Dean team in a previous episode, but I think one of the things that both of you and your departments really play a hand in is really making sure that these students understand that this is realistic goal. Going to the graduate school, whether they're getting a master's, getting a doctorate, or both, it's a realistic goal, and it can happen, through these conversations with the admissions team and with the financial aid team. So I think your teams do a really good job making, what could be an impossible situation to a possible situation. So that brings me to my final question for you both. And that's, what piece of advice would you have for someone who is maybe unsure or maybe not sure where to start, but they're looking at pursuing the graduate school, any of their program offering, and, obviously utilizing financial aid? What advice do you guys have?
Well, I would first say, do your research, ask a lot of questions, make sure you understand in complete depth what you're looking at as far as institution and program. And don't just take opinion as your advice. Talk to the resources, look at alumni testimonials, talk to recent graduates, get their feedback on what those perceptions are, not just in general, but what they are in reality. What was their reality? What were their potential outcomes? Because to hear individuals speak about higher ed and have an experience and having gone through it, that's the best resource for you. because it's another student giving you their feedback about their journey and how their journey transpired and what the outcomes were, versus maybe someone who doesn't have as much experience in understanding what graduate school is or has never attended graduate school. So it's comparing apples to apples and really talking to individuals that can help you make an educated decision about what the right choice is going to be for you. And don't forget about industry. If you know someone in the industry who, for example, might be working as a current family nurse practitioner, and that's an avenue that you're hoping to take, talk to them. What does it take to be successful? What does it take to acquire a job in that particular organization or field? And what would they recommend that you look for as you're going through the journey of finding the right program, right school for them? So network with industry and talk to alumni would be my two biggest recommendations.
Yeah, on the financial side of things, the best advice I can really give any prospective student is to put aside time to have a phone conversation. You can do all the research, you can find all the information on the federal websites, and everything is there. But it can be very heavy. It can be very confusing, even for students who already have used financial aid. They may not understand everything that they're reading. And even if you ask for an email, hey, Ajeet, I got your information. Can you give me some information on X, Y, and Z funding for my MBA? Even an email from me comes just like you're reading the same information from the federal website. That is why I really would advise put aside some time, 15 minutes of your time, to have a phone call with a financial aid professional. Have that conversation. We're able to not only advise on your future, but we do have access to view your funding that was used at your undergraduate level. We can take a look, see what status your loans may be in, how much you've used, and that way we can best help students to make the right decision on how they can fund their educational goals. Put aside time and make that phone call.
Those are some fantastic pieces of advice. I'd like to thank you both for joining us today on the podcast and giving us your insights. It's been truly fantastic to finally get to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Heather.
And
if anyone would like to directly reach out to us, they can reach out to me at sfranks@keiseruniversity.edu, and we'll make sure that this information is available for them at the end of the podcast as well.
And if you have enjoyed this conversation, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and follow. Continue to take a behind-the-scene tour of the graduate school. We'll catch you on the next one.
Have a great day.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.